Hello, this is Angelia, and you are watching or listening to the podcast, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And we left off talking about ambiguous loss, and that's, of course, where you lose someone, but there's no body, or there is a body and their mind is gone, or, something to that effect, and we're going to take back up on that. In New York, after the September 11th attack, thousands of families had to cope with this kind of loss. And, because a lot of them were just incinerated and they never found a body. Giving the situation a name seems to alleviate the anguish of the bereaved, who otherwise may blame themselves for feeling confused, helpless, anxious, and unable to grieve normally because, it's not a normal situation. There's not the body, there's not a funeral. So, it doesn't take the normal course that a normal average death would. Voss also has applied the concept of ambiguous loss to situations in which the loved one is physically present but psychologically absent, as in Alzheimer's disease, drug addiction, and other chronic mental illnesses. We're experiencing some of that in my husband's family now, and, sometimes, that's kind of a thought, is that the person that was there is not there anymore. This person is, just not the same person. People who can best tolerate ambiguous loss tend to have certain characteristics. 1, they are deeply spiritual and do not expect to understand what happens in the world. They have faith and trust in the unknown. And there are some people like that. They're just 100%. I knew a woman I used to work with, and she's like, I just trust God for everything. I don't plan on anything. I just take what comes. And, that's some good faith there. A lot of us like to have goals and plan and, things like that. But having that kind of faith, is a good attitude. 2, they are optimistic by nature. And we've talked about that before. The people who are optimistic usually end up better than people who are pessimistic because you have a better life, because you're willing to put yourself out there, because you have some optimism, whereas people who are pessimists never do much of anything because they figure it's not going to work out anyway. 3, they can hold 2 opposite ideas at the same time, such as my son is gone but is also here with me, and thus can live with the uncertainty. So again, if in that case, like September 11th, they were in the building and, it's been a long enough time where they haven't shown back up, chances are, they're gone. So even though they're gone, they're also in spirit, so they can, probably see you and they're around. So, it helps if you don't have rigid thinking. If you can be flexible in your thinking, that's going to help you emotionally and mentally. Excuse me. 4, often they grew up in a family or culture where mastery, control, and finding answers to questions was less important than learning to live with what is. Unfortunately here in the West, mastery and control and finding answers is highly prized. People want to be the master of their own destinies. In the East, a little more, learning to live with what is more prized. And that's because on that side of the world, they usually had it a little harder than we have it here. So we just kind of take for granted that we can solve things, which we can't always solve. So sometimes there's some cognizant dissonance there, and it takes us a little longer to realize or accept that we can't solve everything. Some Native American cultures provide ritual, ceremonies, and symbols to mark ambiguous loss. An Anishinaabe woman in northern Minnesota who was taking care of her demented mother, held a funeral for her because the woman that I knew was just not there anymore. And like I say, that can be a thing with Alzheimer's, dementia, brain damage. The person you knew might not be there anymore. They're physically there, but their mindset, their, psyche that made them might not be there anymore. So that's also an ambiguous loss. You see the person there, but they're not there. In New York, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani offered official certificates of presumed death and an urn of ashes from ground zero. Some people accepted these tokens as evidence of death, allowing themselves to begin the grieving process. But others chose to wait for more solid proof. And little by little, more proof was found. Not all of them were found. Some people, if they didn't accept, that, then they might still be wondering. But, like I say, everybody's different. Everybody has different levels of resilience and ability to grasp things and accept things. So, different families, different cultures, and different people within a family may have different ways of coping. And I know that's very true. So, like I say, everyone is different. Snowflakes are good. We're all snowflakes. We're all unique. And everybody has different ways of dealing with stuff. So, there's no right or wrong way to deal with ambiguous loss. Therapy can help people to understand, cope, and move on after the loss, even if it remains unclear. And if you are having problems with grief, if you're having a problem getting over a loss, then yes, I believe you should go to therapy and get that, taken out, hashed, get done with it so that you can move on with your life. But therapists working with people suffering from ambiguous loss need to be able to tolerate ambiguity themselves. Because, like I say, you have to be able to accept that, this is not your average loss. And it might take some time. It might take some rethinking of things and acceptance eventually. They must recognize that the loss is ambiguous and that the classic stages of grief work do not apply. Because, like I say, one size does not fit all. And that goes for, grief counseling. Pressing for closure will only bring resistance because they're not 100% sure that this person is gone. So if you keep telling them that, they're going to push back and say, you don't know that. You need to stop because you're ticking me off. Families can learn to manage the stress of ambiguous loss at their own pace and in their own way. So the best thing you can do is support them in whatever way they need it, and help them, be there for them to talk to and everything so that they can come to terms with that type of loss. Before then, children may believe that certain groups of people, such as teachers, parents and children, do not die. That a person who is smart enough or lucky enough can avoid death. And that they themselves will be able to live forever. Because little kids just don't understand things yet. And so they have a lot of ideas that are kind of silly ideas. I know of a kid who thought he brought color into the world. He thought before he was born, the world was black and white. When he was born, he brought color into the world. Of course, we know that that's not true. But little kids think this stuff. And, we kind of chuckle about it. But they're very serious. They believe this stuff. So, when kids come up with these little stories, don't scold them. And don't, I remember I think I was maybe 4 and I said I knew everything, and instead of them saying, yeah, okay, sure you do. I was really fussed at, about that. And, so kids say things because they're ignorant. They don't know. Their brain's not wired together all the way yet. So, you need to answer questions. You need to have a sense of humor about, their little thoughts that they think about things sometimes, because they're kids. They don't know any better. We're the adults. We're supposed to be the adults. So, we should handle it not in a punitive way if they don't think they can die, or they don't think parents or teachers die, or whatever. That's just something that you can talk to them about and do the best you can to make them understand. There's no sense in punishing a child because their thought process is a little out there, because their brains aren't finished, so they are a little out there. So I gotta tell my kids, little kids are crazy, so you gotta watch them all the time because they'll do crazy things. They also may believe that a dead person still can think and feel. That's why sometimes you see little kids and they'll bring like a grandma would like this, or I think dad would like that, because that's how they think and that's how they feel, and they just assume the dead person is still able to think and feel, that like maybe they're just switched off some kind of way. So like I say, they don't really understand, so you need to talk to them about this. The concepts of irreversibility, universality, and cessation of functions usually develop at the time when, according to Piaget, children move from pre-operational to concrete operational thinking. Remember we talked about that a while back. But yeah, the kids who are before concrete thinking might have all kinds of theories. They see connections. It's like, if you were doing a thing where you just hop from word to word, my brain just the phrase just left, and there's not another phrase, so you just don't have a stroke. I'm telling you, just don't have a stroke. It's not cool. But anyway, kids who have more concrete thinking are able to handle concepts better, so sometimes your little folks are not going to understand, but sometimes if you wait a while and they have more questions, you can answer those questions, and then they will get to understand. But you can't expect toddlers to be anything but toddlers. Like I say, they're just past babyhood, not quite to kidhood yet, and they're going to be out there. They're going to be out there in left field a lot, and getting mad at them is not going to help. It's not going to fix anything. You just have to deal with it as it comes. During this period, concepts of causation also become more sophisticated. They understand that things happen for a reason, and things can happen because of this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't have to be one thing. That other things can work on things to make things happen. So as their thinking becomes more sophisticated, they're able to handle more concepts better. Children can be helped to understand death if they are introduced to the concept at an early age and are encouraged to talk about it. Now, one of the things that bothered me is I had a great grandma pass away, and I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral because I was young. And so to me, that was very sad, because the way the adults said it was, we're going to go say goodbye to her. And I was like, I want to say goodbye to her. But, I guess they were worried that I would act out or whatever. I don't know. But you need to let your kids go through that. You need to let them see. You need to answer any questions that they have, because it helps them to learn and process these things. Just pretending this is not something that happened, or that they're too young to understand or shouldn't be there, that's, hard on the kid, because then that makes it something more ambiguous, The death of a pet may provide a natural opportunity. So again, if a pet dies while they're young, they get, understand that's it, and they're gone, and we're going to bury them in the ground, and they'll never come back, and that might be their first experience with death. If another child dies, teachers and parents need to try to allay the surviving children's anxieties. And I know in my elementary school that I went to for the first 2 years, we had a little girl got hit by the school bus. And, that was a topic of conversation there for about 2 weeks in our school. How to, never run out in front of a school bus. Whenever the school bus is stopped and you need to walk around it, such as that you're catching a bus behind them, because we had like 3 bus lanes. You hold your hand up so that the driver can see you. They, have their own little process for this and everything. So a lot of us in that school, kind of thought, wow, this happened to them. Can it happen to us? Is it going to happen to us? Is it safe for us to even walk out there? So, kids do have anxiety about stuff. The way children show grief depends on cognitive and emotional development. How they are in their mindset and in their emotions. Everyone develops at a different rate, so some kids are going to be faster than others, and some kids are going to be slower than others. So, you just have to deal with it as it comes, answer the questions as they come, and not, be upset about anything they're putting out there. The manifestations of grief in children. Children under 3 years old. They may show regression, sadness, fearfulness, loss of appetite, failure to thrive, sleep disturbances, social withdrawal, developmental delay, irritability, excessive crying, increased dependency, and a loss of speech. I knew a little girl whose father passed away, and she stopped talking. So, that can be a thing. Children 3 to 5 years may show it by increased activity, constipation, soiling themselves, bedwetting, anger and temper tantrums, out of control behavior, nightmares, and crying spells. I know of a kid who had some night terrors and things after a family loss, so that is not unusual. School-age children. Deterioration of school performance caused by loss of concentration, lack of interest, lack of motivation, failure to complete assignments, and daydreaming in class. Some kids just do that anyway, but especially if there's been a death of a close person in their family, that can become a thing. Resistance to attending school, crying spells, lying, stealing, nervousness, abdominal pain, headaches, listlessness, and fatigue. And teenagers can show depression, somatic complaints, delinquent behavior, promiscuity, suicide attempts, or dropping out of school. So our little people are being seriously affected mentally and emotionally by death. The younger they are, the harder it is for them to understand, but the older they are, they might understand it all too well and feel like, great, this happened to them, is it going to happen to me? I might want to live all out now so that, I get some life in before that happens to me. So, we got two ends of the scale, but they're both being affected dramatically, only in different ways. Children sometimes express grief through anger, acting out, or refusal to acknowledge a death, as if the pretense that a person is still alive will make it so. Because, that's how little kids sometimes deal with it. As adults, we deal in denial a lot. I know some people who are seriously in denial about their own behaviors. But, little people can decide, well, if I don't acknowledge it, it's not true. I don't have to deal with it. And of course, that's only going to work for so long. But, the best thing you can do is to just gently say, no, they're not coming back. I'm sorry. They're gone, and that's it. And just keep being there for them, because that's really what they need. They may be confused by adults' euphemisms that someone expired, or that the, family lost someone, like, the person was a carton of milk, or, hey, we went out one day and we lost them, I don't know where they're at. Or that someone is asleep. I've heard people say that. They're going to sleep forever, a long time. And kids, aren't understanding that, because they know when they go to sleep, they get up the next morning. So what's this all about? And will never awaken. A loss is more difficult if the child had a troubled relationship with the person who died, because sometimes they may think their mad thoughts about that person might have caused them to die. If a troubled surviving parent depends too much on the child, if the death was unexpected, and now, like I say, some parents can depend on their children too much. I've heard the story that I had to go into a bank when I was 9 and demand money back for my mom. Definitely an adult situation that a 9-year-old shouldn't have been, trying to handle. So, yeah. And sometimes, like I say, you never know when someone's going to pass, and you never know how someone's going to pass. And if it's traumatic for the child, someone is going to have to help them and be there for them, because it can make them think and feel all kinds of stuff. Especially if it was a murder or suicide. Like I say, sometimes kids think they thought a bad thought about this person, and that caused this to happen. And you got to explain to them, no, that's not how. Buzz off, bug. Little gnat trying to attack me. That's not how it works, generally. Unless it's in a fantasy novel. If the child has had previous behavioral or emotional problems, because then they might think, their behavior might have had something to do with it. Or if family and community support are lacking. And again, that is probably the most detrimental thing to a child, is if there is not family support. If that child feels unsupported, uncared for, then that child is going to withdraw to its own, center. And that's not always good, because, like I said, a child thinks and feels oddball things. So they come up with these schemas for life that might not be exactly healthy and may not work with them all the time. So later on, they're going to have to unpack that baggage. So, the best thing you can do for your kids is to be there and help them in any way you can. Parents and older adults can help children deal with bereavement by helping them understand that death is final and inevitable, and that they did not cause the death by their misbehavior or thoughts. And that is definitely something that should be doing with your kids when you're talking about death. And sometimes people say mean things to kind of monopolize on the situation, but that's something you should definitely never do. Children need reassurance that they will continue to receive care from loving adults, and they need to know that. They need to know that even if one of their parents passed away, they're still going to be taken care of. Even if it was the last one, auntie, uncle, whoever's taking them in, needs to let them know, I love you, I care about you, and I am going to take care of you. I understand this is very hard, but I'm going to be here for you. And they need to know that. It is usually helpful to make as few changes as possible in a child's environment, relationships, and daily activities to answer questions simply and honestly. I have known of a case where that had happened. The parents were in an accident, and then the aunt and uncle moved into the kids' house, that was helpful to them. They didn't have to be uprooted. They were still in their same house. It was just different folks were now in the house. And that kind of adjustment is better for the children. These people, I think, were great for doing that, because they uprooted their life and moved it over here. But, they understood that the kids were more important, that the kids' future was more important than dragging them to their place, county away. And, that's how it should be. The children are our future. It sound like the song, but it's true. And the little folks are more important than the big folks. Sorry, big folks, but we're on our way out. So, they got their coming up to do. And to encourage the child to talk about the person who died and about their feelings about it. Because, I remember after the funeral going over to my grandma's house, and, I was wanting to say something, and I was told not to because I might upset my grandma. So, I was not able to talk about that, and, I remember just being really sad and everything because I had no one to talk to about it. And children have questions. They need to know, and, you got to be there for your little people. They have feelings, they have emotions, thoughts, just like you do. And they need to process that. Because like I say, the brain is not wired all together right yet. So they have a little more trouble grasping concepts than an adult does. Death is not something adolescents normally think much about unless they are faced with it, as the March sisters were in Little Women. Because teenagers mostly think they're invulnerable. They're going to live forever, they're immortal. That's kind of their thinking. But that's not true, as we unfortunately know. Still, in many communities in which adolescents and even younger children live, violence and the threat of death are inescapable facts of daily life. And I read a study once where it was talking about, in the ghetto, as they used to call it, where children grow up with trauma on a regular basis. And these children, have PTSD, so that, any loud noise scares them. Anybody yells, they're startled. So, you might think about that before you say that people from that area are, all a certain way or anything, because you don't understand, how they came up if you didn't grow up in that situation. There was nobody firing off AKs and doing drive-bys in the neighborhoods I grew up in, but I know of a place in town that they are doing that. So, you got to take the things into consideration. Many adolescents take heedless risks, and they do, because like I say, they think they're immortal. They hitchhike, drive recklessly, and experiment with drugs and sex, often with tragic results. And I know several people who've overdosed. I know a few people who've drank themselves to death. I know of a couple people who've committed suicide. So, again, you got to talk to your kids. I mean, if your adolescent is just not telling you anything, they suddenly are getting quieter, you are the parent. You're well within your right to go in the room and say, hey, you've been so quiet here lately. What's going on? Do you need to talk about something? And a lot of times they will. And then sometimes they won't. But then they might keep that offer in mind. When it gets bad enough, they may come back and say, hey, yeah, there is something bothering me. Can we talk about it? And it's like, yeah, okay. So, you just need to be there. In their urge to discover and express their identity, they may be more concerned with how they live than with the how long they will live. And let's face it, that's what it's all about when you're a teenager, your identity. You're building yourself, you're becoming you, and you want to know all about you. You're very self-centered at that age, and, you're not thinking about what bad stuff can happen to me. You're thinking about how to express yourself in that period of your life. In adulthood, young adults who have finished their education and have embarked on careers, marriage, or parenthood are generally eager to live their lives they have been preparing for. Because let's face it, that's what it's all about. From the time, you're probably in middle school, they start telling you, well, you need this for college, and you need this, for high school, and then you get in high school, and then it's all about, you need this to graduate, and you need this to get into college, and then you get into the college, and then it's like, well, you need this to graduate, and then you can look for these jobs and everything. So, yeah, young folks are busy preparing for their adult life. If they are suddenly struck by a potentially fatal illness or injury, they are likely to be extremely frustrated, needless to say, because they had plans, and this wasn't in their plans. Frustration may turn to rage, which can make them difficult hospital patients. I saw a show, and certainly that's not reality, but it was a show where this girl was kind of being a terror of the hospital she was in. She had cancer, and she was dying, and she was, like 16, and, she had planned on driving and, graduating and going on to college. She had this whole life plan, and now they were telling her she wasn't going to live, and she was making everybody else's life around her pretty miserable. She was an unholy terror, as they say. So, that would have been a example of that sort of thing. But again, everybody's different. Some people just accept it. Some people just do the best they can. And some people aren't very accepting. So, like I say, everybody's different. And we all deal with death differently. So from your little people to your, adolescent people, just be there for them. Answer their questions. If they got it all wrong in their head, help them get it straight. Don't penalize them and say mean things to them and, punish them for wrong ideas because they don't know any better. They're little kids. And they didn't come pre-wired. They didn't come pre-programmed. Like you get your computer, you set it up, it's ready to go, it's pre-programmed. No, little kids have to be programmed. They're a clean slate, and what you put in is what you get out. So, just be there for your little folks. Talk to them about death, explain things to them, answer their questions, and that's what they really are going to need from you. So, I'm going to leave you there for today, but I hope that helped you maybe figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. That's all for now. Until next time.